As Olivia's trembling fingers traced the faded ink of her mother's secret diary, her entire world imploded in an instant. The truth she uncovered would shatter her family forever, forcing her to question everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and her own identity. The attic was a realm of dust and memories, where forgotten treasures lay hidden beneath years of neglect. Olivia Chun stood at the top of the narrow stairs, surveying the cluttered space with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. Shafts of late afternoon sunlight streamed through the small circular window, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the golden light. At 35, Olivia was a woman caught between two worlds. Her dark hair and almond-shaped eyes spoke of her Chinese heritage, while her mannerisms and speech were pure Midwestern America. She had always felt this duality, a sense of not quite belonging that she could never fully articulate. As she stepped into the attic, the floorboards creaked beneath her feet, a sound that seemed to echo through the years. The musty scent of old paper and aged wood filled her nostrils, triggering a cascade of childhood memories. How many times had she begged to explore this forbidden space, only to be gently but firmly rebuffed by her mother? Margaret Chun's voice drifted up from downstairs, pulling Olivia from her reverie. "Olivia, have you started sorting through those boxes yet?" "Just getting started, Mom," Olivia called back, her voice carrying a hint of exasperation. At 70, Margaret was still as demanding and particular as ever, especially when it came to matters of the house. Olivia's gaze swept across the jumble of cardboard boxes, old furniture draped with sheets and trunks of various sizes. Where to begin? She moved towards a stack of boxes labeled family photos, figuring it was as good a place as any to start. As she lifted the first box, a cloud of dust erupted, causing her to sneeze. Beneath it, partially hidden by an old quilt, was a small ornate trunk she had never seen before. Intrigued, Olivia set down the box and knelt beside the trunk. It was made of dark, polished wood with brass fittings that had long since tarnished. A small lock held it shut, its keyhole caked with decades of grime. Olivia ran her fingers over the smooth wood, wondering what secrets it might contain. She tried the lock, not expecting it to budge, but to her surprise, it clicked open with a gentle turn. Heart racing with anticipation, she lifted the lid. Inside, nestled among faded silk scarves and old letters, was a small leather-bound book. Olivia lifted it carefully, feeling the weight of history in her hands. The leather was soft and worn, the pages yellowed with age. As she opened it, the spine crackled, and the scent of old paper wafted up to her. It was a diary, the first page bearing a date from nearly 4 decades ago, and her mother's unmistakable handwriting. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She knew she shouldn't read it, that these were her mother's private thoughts, but curiosity overwhelmed her sense of propriety. As her eyes scanned the first few entries, Olivia's world began to tilt on its axis. The diary spoke of secret meetings, stolen moments, and a love that burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns. But it wasn't Olivia's father that Margaret wrote about with such passion. It was Robert, Uncle Robert, her father's brother. Olivia's mind reeled as she continued to read, each word searing itself into her consciousness. Phrases jumped out at her. "I can't keep living this lie. Robert is the only one who truly understands me. I don't know how to tell John." And then the entry that changed everything. "I'm pregnant. The timing, it can only be Robert's. What am I going to do?" The diary slipped from Olivia's numb fingers, landing on the dusty floorboards with a soft thud. She sat back, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. Could it be true? Was Uncle Robert her real father? As the implications of this revelation crashed over her, Olivia felt as though the very foundations of her world were crumbling. Everything she thought she knew about her family, about herself, was suddenly cast into doubt. She picked up the diary again, flipping through the pages with trembling hands. The entries became more sporadic after the pregnancy announcement, filled with guilt, fear, and indecision. The last entry, dated just a few months before Olivia's birth, read simply, "I've made my choice. God forgive me." Footsteps on the stairs jolted Olivia back to the present. Panicking, she shoved the diary back into the trunk, and slammed the lid shut. Just as her mother's head appeared at the top of the stairs, Margaret Chun looked around the attic, her brow furrowed in concern. "Olivia, are you all right? You've been up here for hours." Olivia stood quickly, brushing dust from her jeans. "I'm fine, Mom. Just got caught up in some old memories." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Margaret's eyes softened as she took in the cluttered space. "It's amazing how much we accumulate over the years, isn't it? So many memories." Her voice trailed off, and for a moment, Olivia thought she saw a flicker of something. Regret? Fear? In her mother's eyes. "Mom," Olivia began, her voice hesitant. "I found some old photos of you and Uncle Robert from before I was born." Margaret's reaction was subtle but unmistakable. Her body stiffened and a shadow passed over her face. "Oh? I'm sure there are lots of old family photos up here. Why don't you bring them down and we can look through them together?" Olivia nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As her mother turned to go back downstairs, Olivia's gaze was drawn to the trunk. The secret it contained now burned in her mind, demanding acknowledgement, threatening to append everything she thought she knew about her family. That night, as Olivia lay in her childhood bedroom, sleep eluded her. The words from the diary played on an endless loop in her mind, intertwining with memories of family gatherings, of Uncle Robert's easy laugh and the way he always seemed to pay her special attention. She thought of her father, the man she had always believed to be her father, who had passed away 5 years ago. John Chun had been a quiet, steady presence in her life, always supportive but somehow distant. Had he known? The thought that he might have raised her knowing she wasn't truly his daughter sent a fresh wave of pain through Olivia's heart. As dawn broke, Olivia made a decision. She couldn't confront her mother, not yet. She needed more information, more certainty, and there was only one person who might have the answers she sought. The next morning, Olivia approached her mother over breakfast. "Mom, I've been thinking. It's been a while since we've seen Uncle Robert and Aunt Sophia. Why don't we invite them over?" Margaret's hand trembled slightly as she set down her coffee cup. "Oh? Any particular reason?" Olivia shrugged, trying to keep her voice casual. "No reason. Just thought it would be nice to catch up. Maybe this weekend?" After a moment's hesitation, Margaret nodded. "That's a lovely idea, dear. I'll give them a call later today." As her mother busied herself with clearing the breakfast dishes, Olivia retreated to her room, her heart pounding. She had set things in motion now, and there was no turning back. The days leading up to the weekend crawled by, each hour weighted with the burden of Olivia's secret knowledge. She found herself studying old family photos with new eyes, searching for resemblances she had never noticed before. The shape of Uncle Robert's nose, the set of his jaw. How had she never seen how similar they were to her own? When Saturday finally arrived, Olivia felt as though she might burst from the tension. She paced her room, rehearsing what she might say, how she might broach the subject that had consumed her thoughts for days. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway sent a jolt of adrenaline through her system. Taking a deep breath, Olivia made her way downstairs. Uncle Robert and Aunt Sophia stood in the foyer, exchanging greetings with Margaret. As Olivia descended the stairs, Robert's eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw something flicker in their depths. Recognition? Guilt? Before it was quickly masked with a warm smile. "Olivia, look at you. More beautiful every time I see you," Robert said, enveloping her in a hug that suddenly felt far too intimate. Aunt Sophia hung back, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she observed the interaction. Olivia had always been fond of her aunt, admiring her quiet strength and perceptiveness. Now, she wondered how much Sophia knew, how much she had suspected over the years. As they moved to the living room, the air seemed thick with unspoken tensions. Olivia found herself hyper-aware of every glance, every subtle shift in body language. She noticed how her mother's laugh seemed a touch too high, how Uncle Robert's eyes kept darting towards her when he thought she wasn't looking. The conversation flowed around her, touching on safe topics, work, the weather, local gossip. Olivia barely heard any of it, her mind racing as she tried to find the right moment, the right words to shatter this carefully maintained facade. Finally, during a lull in the conversation, Olivia took a deep breath and spoke. I was in the attic the other day, looking through some old things. The room went silent, all eyes turning to her. Olivia forged ahead, her heart pounding. I found some interesting photos and a diary. The effect was instantaneous. Margaret's face drained of color, while Robert went very still, his knuckles white where he gripped the arm of his chair. Sophia's gaze darted between them, a mixture of resignation and sorrow in her eyes. "Olivia," Margaret began, her voice trembling. "I don't know what you think you found, but don't." Olivia cut her off, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "Don't lie to me. Not anymore." She turned to face Robert, meeting his gaze squarely. "I know the truth. I know that you're my father." The words hung in the air, heavy and irrevocable. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Then, like a dam breaking, the room erupted into chaos. Margaret burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. Robert stood abruptly, pacing the room like a caged animal. Sophia remained seated, her face a mask of calm even as her eyes brimmed with unshed tears. "How could you keep this from me?" Olivia demanded, her voice rising. "All these years, all the lies. Did you ever plan to tell me the truth?" Robert stopped his pacing, turning to face her. "Olivia, you have to understand. It was complicated. We never meant to hurt anyone." "Hurt anyone?" Olivia laughed bitterly. "What about my father, John? Did he know? Did he spend his entire life raising a child he knew wasn't his?" Margaret looked up then, her face streaked with tears. He knew. "We told him before you were born. He chose to stay, to raise you as his own." The revelation hit Olivia like a physical blow. She sank onto the couch, her mind reeling. John Chan, the quiet, reserved man she had called father, had known all along, had chosen to love her, to raise her, despite knowing the truth of her parentage. As the initial shock began to subside, a new emotion took its place. Anger. Anger at the lies, at the years of deception, at the choices made by others that had shaped her entire life without her knowledge or consent. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "How could you all live with this secret for so long?" As the weight of Olivia's words settled over the room, a heavy silence descended. It was Sophia who finally broke it, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "Olivia," she began, leaning forward slightly, "I know you're hurting right now, and you have every right to be angry. But there's more to this story than you know." Olivia turned to her aunt, a mixture of confusion and hope in her eyes. Had Sophia been an unwitting victim in all this too? Sophia continued, her gaze moving between Margaret and Robert. "I've known about this for years. I suspected almost from the beginning, but it wasn't until you were about 5 that I confronted Robert." Robert sank back into his chair, looking suddenly old and defeated. "Sophia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Sophia cut him off firmly. "It's time for the truth, all of it?" Margaret had gone very still, her tear-stained face a mask of resignation. Olivia felt as though she were watching a play unfold, a drama of secrets and lies that had been decades in the making. Sophia took a deep breath before continuing. "When I confronted Robert, he broke down and told me everything. About the affair, about you, Olivia. I was devastated doesn't begin to cover it. I wanted to leave, to tell John, to blow this whole thing wide open. Why didn't you?" Olivia asked, her voice small. "Because of you," Sophia said simply, "and because of John. He already knew, you see, and he had made the decision to raise you as his own, to keep the family together. I couldn't be the one to destroy that." Olivia's mind reeled. The image of her father, quiet, steady John Chun, took on new dimensions. He had known, had chosen to love her despite everything. The enormity of his sacrifice threatened to overwhelm her. But why? Olivia asked, turning to Margaret and Robert. "Why keep it a secret for so long? Why not tell me when I was old enough to understand?" Margaret lifted her head, meeting Olivia's gaze for the first time since the revelation. We thought we were protecting you. And John, he loved you so much, Olivia. The thought of hurting him, of taking that away from him. And what about me?" Olivia demanded, anger flaring again. "Didn't I deserve to know the truth about who I am?" Robert leaned forward, his face etched with regret. "We made a mistake," he said softly. "We thought we were doing the right thing, but we were wrong. We should have told you." As the truth of her family's tangled history unfolded, Olivia felt as though the very foundations of her identity were shifting. Everything she had believed about herself, about her place in the world, was suddenly cast into doubt. "I need some air," she said abruptly, standing up. Without waiting for a response, she strode out of the living room and into the backyard. The late afternoon sun was warm on her face as Olivia paced the familiar lawn. How many summer barbecues had they had here? How many family gatherings, with everyone playing their assigned roles in this elaborate deception? She heard the back door open and close behind her, but didn't turn around. Soft footsteps approached, and then Sophia was beside her. "I'm so sorry, Olivia," her aunt said softly. "We all made choices we thought were for the best, but we didn't consider the long-term consequences." Olivia turned to look at her aunt, seeing the genuine sorrow in her eyes. "How did you do it?" she asked. "How did you stay, knowing what you knew?" Sophia was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "It wasn't easy," she finally said. "There were times I wanted to pack my bags and leave, but I loved Robert, and I loved you. In the end, I chose to forgive, to try and make the best of the situation we found ourselves in." As Olivia processed her aunt's words, a new question formed in her mind. "Aunt Sophia, why didn't you and Uncle Robert ever have children of your own?" A shadow passed over Sophia's face. "We tried," she said softly, "for years, but it never happened for us. In a way, I think that made it easier for me to accept you as part of our family. You became the child I couldn't have." The revelation added yet another layer of complexity to the family dynamics Olivia was only now beginning to understand. She thought of all the times Uncle Robert and Aunt Sophia had doted on her, showering her with attention and affection. Had that been guilt, compensation, or simply love? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Olivia felt a subtle shift within herself. The initial shock and anger were still there, but alongside them grew a tentative understanding. The choices her family had made were far from perfect, but they had been made out of love, however misguided. "I think I'm ready to go back inside," Olivia said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. Sophia nodded, giving her arm a gentle squeeze before they made their way back to the house. In the living room, Margaret and Robert sat in tense silence. As Olivia entered, they both looked up, their faces a mixture of hope and fear. "I'm not saying I forgive you," Olivia began, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm not sure I can, at least not yet, but I'm willing to listen. I want to understand." Over the next few hours, as the sky outside darkened and the room grew dim, the true story of Olivia's origins unfolded. Margaret spoke of her unhappy marriage to John, of feeling trapped and misunderstood. Robert described the guilt that had eaten at him for years, the love for Olivia that he had been forced to express only as an uncle. As they talked, Olivia began to see her family members not as the larger-than-life figures of her childhood, but as flawed, complex human beings. People who had made mistakes, who had struggled with impossible choices, who had tried, however imperfectly, to do what they thought was right. It was well past midnight when the conversation finally wound down. Exhausted both emotionally and physically, Olivia excused herself and retreated to her childhood bedroom. As she lay in bed, staring at the familiar patterns of shadows on the ceiling, Olivia tried to make sense of everything she had learned. Her mind kept returning to John Chun, the man who had raised her, who had known she wasn't his biological daughter, but had loved her unconditionally anyway. With a sudden clarity, Olivia realized that tomorrow she needed to visit her father's grave. There were things she needed to say, questions she needed to ask, even if he could no longer answer. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Olivia dressed quietly and slipped out of the house before anyone else was awake. The drive to the cemetery was familiar, but today it felt different. Everything felt different now. As she approached John Chun's grave, a bouquet of white lily in her hand, Olivia felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She knelt before the headstone, tracing the engraved letters with her fingers. "Hi, Dad," she said softly, her voice catching. "I know everything now. About Robert, about Mom, about you. Tears began to fall as Olivia poured out her heart to the father she had lost. She spoke of her confusion, her anger, her gratitude for his unwavering love. As she talked, she felt a subtle shift within herself, a gradual acceptance of the complex tapestry of love and choices that had shaped her life. As the morning wore on, Olivia remained at the grave, lost in thought and memory. It was there, in the quiet of the cemetery, that she began to piece together a new understanding of herself and her family. She thought of Robert, her biological father, and the years of silent longing he must have endured. Of Margaret, caught between love and duty, carrying the weight of her choices for decades. Of Sophia, choosing forgiveness and love in the face of betrayal. And of John Chun, the man who had chosen to be her father in every way that mattered, who had loved her unconditionally, knowing the truth all along. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Olivia stood, her legs stiff from kneeling. She placed a lily gently on the grave and took a deep breath. "I love you, Dad," she said softly. "Thank you for everything." Single quotes. As she walked back to her car, Olivia felt as though she were emerging from a long, dark tunnel. The world around her seemed brighter somehow, more vivid. The truth she had discovered was painful, yes, but it was also liberating. For the first time in her life, she felt she truly knew who she was and where she came from. Driving back to her childhood home, Olivia knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be more difficult conversations, more tears, more struggles to redefine relationships in light of the truth. But she also knew that she was strong enough to face it all. As she pulled into the driveway, Olivia saw her mother standing on the porch, worry etched on her face. For a moment, she hesitated, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on her. Then, taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car. It was time to begin the long, complex process of healing. Time to forge a new kind of family, one built on honesty and understanding rather than secrets and lies. As she walked towards the house, Olivia felt a glimmer of hope. This was not the end of her story, but a new beginning. As Olivia approached the porch, she saw the tension in her mother's posture, the anxiety etched in the lines around her eyes. For a moment, she was transported back to her childhood, remembering all the times she had run to her mother for comfort. Now, everything felt different, as if she were seeing Margaret Chun through a new lens. "Olivia," Margaret began, her voice trembling slightly. "I was so worried. Where did you go?" Olivia paused at the foot of the porch steps, looking up at the woman who had raised her. "I went to see Dad," she said simply. "I needed to talk to him, I guess." Understanding dawned on Margaret's face, followed quickly by a flash of guilt. "Oh, Olivia," she said softly, "I'm so sorry for everything." For a moment, Olivia felt the familiar surge of anger and betrayal. But as she looked at her mother, really looked at her, she saw not just the woman who had lied to her for years, but also the young woman from the diary, scared and conflicted, trying to navigate an impossible situation. "I know, Mom," Olivia said, her voice steady. "I'm not saying it's okay. It's not. But I think I'm starting to understand a little better." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, and she took a hesitant step forward. "Can we talk, please?" Olivia nodded, following her mother into the house. They settled in the kitchen, the heart of so many family memories. As Margaret busied herself making tea, a ritual that had always preceded serious conversations in their household, Olivia found herself studying her mother's movements, looking for similarities and differences between them. "Where are Uncle Robert and Aunt Sophia?" Olivia asked as Margaret set a steaming mug in front of her. "They went home last night," Margaret replied, taking a seat across from her daughter. We thought you might need some space to process everything." Olivia nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "I have so many questions," she said after a moment. "I don't even know where to start." Margaret took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly on the table. "Start anywhere," she said softly. "I promise. No more lies. No more secrets." And so, over the next few hours, Olivia asked. She asked about the affair, how it started, how long it lasted. She asked about the decision to keep her parentage a secret, about how John had reacted when he found out. She asked about the years of family gatherings, of Christmases and birthdays, where everyone played their assigned roles in this elaborate deception. Margaret answered everything as honestly as she could, her voice sometimes breaking, sometimes barely above a whisper. She spoke of the guilt that had eaten at her for years, of the times she had wanted to tell Olivia the truth, but had been too afraid of the consequences. "I know it's no excuse," Margaret said, wiping away a tear, "but we really did think we were protecting you. And John, he loved you so much, Olivia. The thought of hurting him, of taking that away from him, it seemed unthinkable." Olivia listened, her emotions swinging between understanding and renewed anger. "But what about me?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "Didn't I deserve to know the truth about who I am?" Margaret flinched at the pain in her daughter's voice. "You're right," she said softly. "We were wrong. We should have told you when you were old enough to understand. I see that now." As the afternoon wore on, Olivia found herself remembering moments from her childhood, seeing them in a new light. The way Uncle Robert's eyes would light up when she achieved something. The subtle tension that sometimes arose between him and her father at family gatherings. Did he ever resent me?" Olivia asked, voicing a fear that had been growing since the revelation. Margaret's response was immediate and vehement. "Never," she said, reaching across the table to grasp Olivia's hand. "Olivia, you have to understand. John chose to be your father. From the moment he found out, he never wavered in his love for you. If anything, I think he loved you even more fiercely because of it." Olivia felt tears welling up in her eyes. The image of her father, quiet, steady John Chun, took on new dimensions. His unwavering support, his quiet pride in her achievements, his constant presence in her life. All of it seemed even more precious now. "I wish," Olivia began, her voice catching. "I wish I could talk to him, tell him I know. Thank him." Margaret squeezed her hand. "He knew, sweetheart. In his heart, he knew you loved him, and he never doubted for a moment that you were his daughter in every way that mattered." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the kitchen, Olivia felt a subtle shift within herself. The anger and betrayal were still there, but alongside them grew a tentative understanding. The choices her family had made were far from perfect, but they had been made out of love, however misguided. "What happens now?" Olivia asked, her voice tired but steady. Margaret looked at her daughter, a mixture of hope and trepidation in her eyes. "That's up to you, Olivia. We've kept this secret for so long. It's time for you to decide what you want to do with the truth." Olivia nodded, her mind already racing with the implications. Did she want to build a relationship with Robert as her father? How would this change her interactions with Aunt Sophia? And what about her extended family, her cousins, her father's relatives? Did they know? Should they know? "I need time," Olivia said finally, "to think, to process all of this. And I think I need to talk to Uncle Robert alone." Margaret nodded, understanding and a hint of fear in her eyes. "Of course, whatever you need." Single quotes. As Olivia stood to leave the kitchen, she paused, looking back at her mother. Despite everything, she felt a surge of love for this woman who had raised her, who had carried the weight of this secret for so long. "Mom," she said softly, "I'm not saying I forgive you. Not yet. But I love you. That hasn't changed." Margaret's eyes filled with tears once more. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than you could ever know." That night, as Olivia lay in her childhood bed, sleep eluded her. Her mind raced with memories, questions, and possibilities. She thought of Robert, her biological father, and wondered what kind of relationship they might build. She thought of Sophia and the strength it must have taken to stay, to love, to forgive. And she thought of John Chun, the man who had chosen to be her father in every way that mattered, who had loved her unconditionally, knowing the truth all along. As dawn broke, Olivia made a decision. She would meet with Robert, hear his side of the story. She would try to understand, to forge a new kind of relationship with him. But she would also honor the memory of John Chun, the father who had raised her, who had loved her without reservation. With this resolution in mind, Olivia finally drifted off to sleep, her dreams a swirling mix of past and present. of the family she had always known, and the new connections she was just beginning to explore. When she awoke several hours later, Olivia felt a strange sense of calm. The world hadn't changed overnight, but her perception of it had shifted dramatically. As she made her way downstairs, she found her mother in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. "Good morning," Margaret said hesitantly, searching Olivia's face for clues to her mood. "Morning," Olivia replied, pouring herself a cup. "I've been thinking. I want to meet with Uncle Robert." "To talk?" Margaret nodded, relief and apprehension warring on her face. "I can call him, if you'd like." "No," Olivia said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I'll do it. This needs to be between us." As she dialed Robert's number, Olivia felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. How does one start a conversation with the man who is suddenly your father? Robert answered on the second ring, his voice cautious. "Olivia? Hi, Uncle Robert," Olivia began, stumbling slightly over the title. "I was wondering if we could meet to talk." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then Robert's voice, thick with emotion. "Of course. Anytime, anywhere you want." They agreed to meet at a small park near Olivia's childhood home, a neutral ground that held no loaded memories for either of them. As Olivia hung up the phone, she turned to find her mother watching her, a mixture of pride and sadness in her eyes. "You're so strong, Olivia," Margaret said softly. "Stronger than I ever was." Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. "I learned from you, Mom," she said, "and from Dad, both of them." As she left the house, Olivia felt as though she were stepping into a new chapter of her life. The truth she had discovered was painful, yes, but it was also liberating. For the first time, she felt she truly knew who she was and where she came from. The park was quiet when she arrived, the morning sun casting dappled shadows through the trees. Robert was already there, sitting on a bench, his posture tense with anticipation. As Olivia approached, she saw him in a new light. The familiar features of her uncle were suddenly transformed, becoming those of a father she was only now beginning to know. "Olivia," Robert said, standing as she neared. "Thank you for meeting me," Olivia nodded, taking a seat on the bench. Robert sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air between them. Then, taking a deep breath, Olivia turned to face the man who was her biological father. "I think," she said slowly, "it's time we really talk." Robert nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "I've waited for this moment for so long," he said softly, "and now that it's here, I hardly know where to begin." Olivia studied his face, noting the familiar features she had never truly recognized before. The shape of his nose, the set of his jaw. How had she never seen how similar they were to her own? "Why don't we start at the beginning?" Olivia suggested, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions within her. "Tell me about you and Mom, how it started." Robert took a deep breath, his gaze distant as he delved into memories long suppressed. "Your mother and I, we grew up together. We were always close, even as children. But when she married John, I thought that was it. I tried to move on, to be happy for them." He paused, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "But then, years later, Margaret and I found ourselves working on a project together. We were spending long hours in each other's company, and old feelings resurfaced. We tried to fight it, Olivia. We really did. But you didn't," Olivia finished for him, her voice tinged with a mixture of understanding and residual anger. Robert nodded, shame evident in his expression. "It was wrong. We both knew it was wrong, but at the time, it felt like the most real thing in our lives. We were in love, or at least we thought we were." As Robert continued his story, Olivia listened with a growing sense of complexity. The affair, which had seemed so black and white in her initial anger, began to take on shades of gray. She heard of stolen moments of happiness, followed by crushing guilt, of attempts to end things, only to be drawn back together. And finally, of the moment when Margaret discovered she was pregnant. "When your mother told me, I was terrified," Robert admitted, "but also, selfishly, happy. I wanted to do the right thing. I was ready to leave Sophia, to face whatever consequences came our way. But Margaret, She couldn't bear the thought of hurting John like that. Olivia felt a surge of emotion at the mention of the man she had always known as her father. "So you both decided to keep it a secret? To let Dad raise me as his own?" Robert nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. John he was a better man than I could ever hope to be. When Margaret told him the truth, he didn't rage or threaten to leave. He simply asked what would be best for the baby, for you. As Robert spoke of John's decision to raise Olivia as his own, of the pact of silence that had shaped their lives for decades, Olivia felt a renewed surge of love and admiration for the father she had lost. "Did you ever regret it?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Letting Dad raise me instead of you?" Robert was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distance. "Every single day," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "And yet, I knew it was the right decision. John was an amazing father to you, Olivia. He gave you a stability, a wholeness that I'm not sure I could have provided." As they continued to talk, the sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the bench where they sat. Olivia asked about the years of family gatherings, of watching her grow up from a distance. Robert spoke of the joy and pain of being in her life as an uncle, of the constant internal struggle between wanting to claim her as his daughter and knowing he had to maintain the facade. "There were so many times I wanted to tell you," Robert said, his voice filled with regret. "When you graduated high school, when you got into college, I was so proud of you, Olivia, so proud, and yet I couldn't fully express it." Olivia felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I always wondered why you seemed to take such an interest in my life," she said softly. "Why you were always there for my big moments." Robert nodded, a sad smile on his face. "I tried to be there for you in whatever way I could. It was never enough, but it was all I had." As their conversation progressed, Olivia found herself asking about Sophia. How did Aunt Sophia handle all of this? When did she find out? Robert's expression grew pained. "Sophia, she's an extraordinary woman. She suspected almost from the beginning, but it wasn't until you were about 5 that she confronted me. I broke down and told her everything, and she stayed." Olivia asked, incredulous. Robert nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and guilt. "She did. She was angry, hurt beyond words. But she also loved you, Olivia. And she loved me, despite everything. She made the choice to forgive, to try and make the best of the situation we found ourselves in." As Olivia processed this new information, she felt a renewed surge of admiration for her aunt. The strength it must have taken to stay, to love, to forgive. It was almost beyond comprehension. "I think," Olivia said slowly, "that I'd like to talk to Aunt Sophia too, to thank her and to understand her side of things." Robert nodded, relief evident in his expression. "She'd like that. She's been worried about you, about how you're handling all of this." As their conversation began to wind down, Olivia found herself facing the question that had been lurking at the back of her mind since the revelation. "So, where do we go from here? What kind of relationship do you want us to have?" Robert's response was immediate and heartfelt. "Whatever kind of relationship you want, Olivia. I know I have no right to expect anything from you. If you want me in your life as your father, I would be honored beyond words. If you prefer to keep things as they were, with me as your uncle, I'll understand. And if you need time and space, I'll respect that too." Olivia nodded, grateful for his understanding. I think I need some time to process everything, to figure out how I feel, but I don't want to cut you out of my life. We can start slow maybe, get to know each other in this new context." Robert's eyes filled with tears, a smile breaking across his face. "I'd like that very much, Olivia. Thank you." As they stood to leave, Robert hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "There's one more thing I want you to know, Olivia. John, your dad, he was my brother, but he was also my best friend. The guilt of betraying him, of keeping this secret, it's something I'll carry for the rest of my life. But I want you to know that he loved you more than anything in this world. You were his daughter in every way that mattered." Olivia felt her own eyes welling up with tears. "I know," she said softly, "and he'll always be my dad. That hasn't changed." As they parted ways, Olivia felt a strange mixture of emotions washing over her. The anger and betrayal were still there, but alongside them grew a tentative hope, This was not the end of her story, but a new beginning, a chance to forge relationships based on truth rather than secrets. Walking home, Olivia's mind raced with everything she had learned, everything she still needed to process. She thought of her mother, waiting anxiously at home, of Aunt Sophia, whose strength and forgiveness she was only now beginning to understand, of Uncle Robert, no, her biological father, and the complex web of love, guilt, and missed opportunities that had shaped their relationship. And always, she thought of John Chun, the man who had chosen to be her father, who had loved her unconditionally despite knowing the truth. His quiet strength, his unwavering support, these were the foundations upon which she had built her life. And no revelation, no matter how earth-shattering, could ever change that. As Olivia approached her childhood home, she felt a sense of resolution settling over her. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be more difficult conversations, more tears, more struggles to redefine relationships in light of the truth. But she also knew that she was strong enough to face it all. Because in the end, family was not just about blood. It was about love, about choices, about the connections we forge and nurture over a lifetime. And Olivia was determined to honor all the complex, imperfect love that had shaped her life, both the love she had always known and the love she was only now beginning to understand. As Olivia stepped into her childhood home, she found her mother waiting anxiously in the living room. Margaret's eyes were red-rimmed, evidence of tears shed in her daughter's absence. "How did it go?" Margaret asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Olivia took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "It was intense, emotional, but I think it was necessary." Margaret nodded, relief and apprehension warring on her face. "And how do you feel?" "Honestly," Olivia said, sinking into the familiar comfort of the old armchair, "I'm not entirely sure. It's a lot to process. But I think I'm starting to understand things a little better." As Olivia recounted her conversation with Robert, she watched her mother's reactions carefully. The pain, the guilt, the flickers of old love, all of it played across Margaret's face, a testament to the complex emotions that had shaped their family's history. "Mom," Olivia said softly when she had finished, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Margaret straightened, bracing herself. "Of course, sweetheart. Anything. Do you regret it? Not the affair or the lies, but do you regret choosing Dad, John, over Robert?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant as if looking back through the years. "No," she finally said, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. "I regret the pain I caused, the lies we told. But choosing John, choosing our family, I could never regret that. Your father he was the best man I've ever known, Olivia. Loving him, building a life with him, raising you together, that was the best decision I ever made." Olivia felt a weight lift from her chest at her mother's words. Despite everything, the foundation of her childhood, the love that had shaped her, remained solid. "I've been thinking," Olivia said after a moment, "about Dad, about everything he did for us, everything he sacrificed. I want to do something to honor his memory." Margaret leaned forward, interest peeking in her eyes. "What did you have in mind?" "I'm not sure yet," Olivia admitted, "but I was thinking, maybe a scholarship in his name? For students who've overcome adversity or who are pursuing his field of study." A smile broke across Margaret's face, the first genuine one Olivia had seen in days. "Oh, Olivia, he would have loved that." He was always so passionate about education, about giving opportunities to those who needed them most. As they began to discuss the possibilities, Olivia felt a warmth spreading through her chest. This was something tangible, something positive she could create out of the turmoil of the past few days. A way to honor the father who had chosen her, who had loved her unconditionally. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Olivia threw herself into researching how to set up a scholarship fund, reaching out to her father's old colleagues and friends for support and input. The project became a lifeline, a way to channel her conflicting emotions into something productive. Throughout this time, Olivia also began the delicate process of redefining her relationships with her family members. She had regular coffee meetings with Robert, slowly getting to know him not just as her uncle, but as her biological father. These meetings were often awkward, filled with long pauses and uncertain glances. But there were also moments of connection, of shared interests and traits that Olivia had never recognized before. Her relationship with Aunt Sophia took on new depths as well. During a long, emotional conversation, Olivia learned the full extent of her aunt's sacrifice and forgiveness. Sophia spoke of her initial anger and heartbreak, of the difficult decision to stay and make their marriage work, and of the love she had developed for Olivia over the years. "You were the child we could never have," Sophia admitted, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Loving you, being a part of your life, it helped heal something in both of us." As for Margaret, Olivia found her relationship with her mother evolving in unexpected ways. The initial anger and sense of betrayal gradually gave way to a more nuanced understanding. They had long, sometimes painful conversations about the past, about the choices that had been made, about the complex interplay of love, duty, and personal happiness. Through it all, Olivia found herself returning again and again to thoughts of John Chun. She visited his grave regularly, sometimes talking aloud about her day, her feelings, her newfound understanding of the sacrifices he had made. Other times, she simply sat in silence, feeling a connection to the man who had chosen to be her father in every way that mattered. It was during one of these visits, about a month after the initial revelation, that Olivia had an epiphany. She had been struggling with how to reconcile her love for John with her growing relationship with Robert, feeling as though she were somehow betraying her father's memory by connecting with her biological parent. As she sat by the grave, tracing the familiar letters of John's name, Olivia suddenly remembered something her father had often told her. "Love isn't a finite resource, Olivia. The more you give, the more you have to give." In that moment, Olivia understood that she didn't have to choose. She could honor John's memory, cherish the years of love and guidance he had given her, while also exploring a relationship with Robert. Her heart was big enough for both. With this realization came a sense of peace that had eluded Olivia since the discovery of the diary. She felt as though she were finally finding her footing in this new reality, able to move forward without denying or betraying her past. The day of the scholarship fund launch arrived, a crisp autumn afternoon that reminded Olivia of countless back-to-school seasons with her father. The event was held at the local community college where John had taught for many years, attended by former colleagues, students, and family friends. As Olivia stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered crowd, she felt a surge of emotion. Her mother sat in the front row, pride shining in her eyes. Robert and Sophia were there too, supportive but maintaining a respectful distance. And all around were people whose lives had been touched by John Chun, a testament to the impact one person could have. "My father, John Chun, believed in the power of education to transform lives," Olivia began, her voice strong and clear. "He believed that everyone deserved a chance to learn, to grow, to reach their full potential. This scholarship fund is a way to continue his legacy, to pass on the kindness and support he showed to so many." As she spoke about her father's dedication to his students, his unwavering support for those facing challenges, Olivia felt a deep sense of connection to the man who had raised her. The truth about her biological parentage didn't diminish John's role in her life. If anything, knowing the choice he had made only deepened her love and respect for him. "In honoring my father's memory," Olivia concluded, her voice thick with emotion, "we're not just celebrating the past. We're investing in the future. We're saying that love, compassion, and the belief in human potential can create ripples that extend far beyond one person's lifetime." As applause filled the room, Olivia felt a sense of completion. This was not an ending, but a new beginning, a way to carry forward the best parts of her father's legacy while forging her own path. In the reception that followed, Olivia found herself surrounded by people sharing stories about her father. Former students spoke of his patience and encouragement. Colleagues recalled his dedication and integrity. Friends remembered his quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. As she listened, Olivia realized that these were the qualities she wanted to embody in her own life. regardless of biology. These were the traits she had inherited from John Chun, the true measures of what it meant to be his daughter. As the reception wound down, Olivia found herself standing with her mother, Robert, and Sophia, the four people at the center of the complex web of love, secrets, and choices that had shaped her life. There was an awkward moment of silence, each of them unsure how to navigate this new dynamic in public. It was Sophia who finally broke the tension, reaching out to squeeze Olivia's hand. "John would have been so proud of you today," she said softly. "This scholarship, it's a beautiful way to honor him." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means a lot, coming from you." Robert cleared his throat, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Your father, John, he was always the best of us. This fund, it's exactly what he would have wanted." Margaret nodded, her arms slipping around Olivia's waist. "He always said that education was the key to opening doors. Now, because of you, he'll keep opening doors for students long into the future." As Olivia looked at the three of them, her mother, her biological father, her aunt who had chosen to love her despite everything, she felt a surge of complex emotions. Gratitude for the love that had shaped her life, sadness for the years of secrecy and missed connections, hope for the new relationships they were forging. "I couldn't have done this without all of you," Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for being here, for supporting this. I know it can't be easy, given everything." There was a moment of shared understanding, of acknowledged pain and tentative healing. Then Robert spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "Family isn't always easy, Olivia, but it's always worth it. We're here for you, however you need us to be." As they left the reception, walking together into the crisp autumn evening, Olivia felt as though a new chapter was beginning. The truth was out, the initial shock had passed, and now they were all learning to navigate this new reality together. Over the next few months, Olivia threw herself into her work, finding solace and purpose in her teaching. She also continued to develop her relationships with her newly expanded family, each interaction bringing new insights and understanding. Her coffee meetings with Robert evolved from awkward silences to genuine conversations. They discovered shared interests in history and literature, debated current events, and slowly began to forge a connection that was uniquely their own. During one such meeting, as they discussed a book they'd both recently read, Robert paused, a wistful expression crossing his face. "You know," he said softly, "when you get excited about something, you furrow your brow just like I do. It's nice to see a bit of myself in you." Olivia felt a flutter of emotion at his words. It was still strange, reconciling the uncle she'd known all her life with the biological father she was just getting to know. But moments like these helped bridge the gap. Her relationship with Sophia deepened as well. Olivia found herself in awe of her aunt's strength and capacity for forgiveness. During a heart-to-heart conversation over tea, Sophia shared more about her decision to stay with Robert after learning the truth. "It wasn't easy," Sophia admitted, her hands clasped tightly around her teacup. "There were days I wanted to leave, to never look back, but I loved Robert, despite everything. And I loved you, Olivia. The thought of losing both of you, it was more painful than staying and working through it." Olivia reached out, covering Sophia's hands with her own. "I can't imagine how hard that must have been. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. Thank you, Aunt Sophia, for staying, for loving me, for being part of my life." As for Margaret, Olivia found her relationship with her mother evolving in unexpected ways. The initial anger and sense of betrayal gradually gave way to a more nuanced understanding. They had long, sometimes painful conversations about the past, about the choices that had been made, about the complex interplay of love, duty, and personal happiness. During one such conversation, as they sorted through old family photos, Margaret paused, holding a picture of John with a young Olivia on his shoulders. "You know," she said softly, "there were times I almost told you the truth. Moments when the guilt was almost too much to bear. But then I'd see you with John, see how much he loved you, how much you adored him, and I couldn't bring myself to shatter that." Olivia studied the photo, feeling a familiar ache in her chest. "I understand why you kept a secret," she said slowly. "I'm not saying it was right, but I understand. And I'm grateful for the childhood you and Dad gave me. That was real, regardless of biology. As the months passed, Olivia found herself settling into a new norm. The scholarship fund was thriving, already making a difference in the lives of several students. She maintained relationships with all members of her complex family, each connection unique and valuable in its own way. But it was during a quiet moment alone that Olivia had perhaps her most profound realization. She was sorting through some old belongings, preparing to move to a new apartment, when she came across a book her father had given her years ago. Inside the cover, in John's neat handwriting, was an inscription: "To my dearest Olivia, remember that our lives are shaped not just by the circumstances we're born into, but by the choices we make and the love we give. You are, and always will be, my beloved daughter. Never doubt that. Love, Dad." As Olivia read those words, tracing her fingers over her father's handwriting, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The truth about her biological parentage had shaken her world, yes, but it hadn't changed the fundamental truths of her life, the love that had shaped her, the values she held dear, the person she had become. John Chun had chosen to be her father, had loved her unconditionally, knowing she wasn't biologically his. That choice, that love, was a gift beyond measure. And in honoring his memory and carrying forward his legacy of kindness and education, Olivia was making her own choice to be his daughter in every way that mattered. As she carefully packed the book away, Olivia felt as though she had finally found her footing in this new reality. She was John Chun's daughter. She was also Robert's biological child. She was Margaret's daughter, Sophia's niece, a teacher, a friend, a complex individual shaped by love, secrets, choices, and truth. All of these facets of her identity coexisted, sometimes in tension, but ultimately creating the unique tapestry of who she was. And for the first time since discovering the diary in the attic, Olivia felt truly at peace with all the aspects of her heritage and identity. That evening, as she sat on the floor of her half-packed apartment, Olivia began to write. She wrote about family secrets and unexpected truths, about the father who chose her and the father connected by blood, about a mother's impossible choice and an aunt's extraordinary forgiveness. She wrote about the complex, messy, beautiful reality of family, not just the one we're born into, but the one we create through love and choice. As the words flowed onto the page, Olivia realized that this story, her story, might have the power to help others grappling with family secrets, with questions of identity and belonging. Perhaps by sharing her journey, she could extend the ripples of understanding and healing even further. With renewed purpose, Olivia continued to write long into the night. This was not just an ending to the tumultuous chapter of discovery, but the beginning of a new journey, one of self-discovery, of forging new connections while honoring old ones, of creating meaning from the complex tapestry of her family history. As she finally set down her pen in the early hours of the morning, Olivia felt a sense of lightness she hadn't experienced in months. The truth, with all its pain and complexity, had indeed set her free. And now, she was ready to step into the future, carrying with her the love of two fathers, the strength of her mother and aunt, and the resilience she had discovered within herself. As dawn broke, casting a soft golden light through the windows of her half-packed apartment, Olivia reread what she had written. The pages were filled with raw emotion, honest reflections, and hard-won insights. She realized that in writing her story, she had not only processed her own feelings, but had also created something that might resonate with others, facing similar struggles. With a surge of determination, Olivia decided to turn her late-night writing session into something more. Over the next few weeks, as she settled into her new apartment, she devoted her evenings and weekends to expanding her initial outpouring into a full manuscript. The process was cathartic, allowing her to explore the nuances of her family's history and her own evolving identity. As she wrote, Olivia found herself reaching out to various family members, seeking their perspectives and memories to fill in gaps in her understanding. These conversations, while sometimes painful, brought a new depth to her relationships. One evening, She called Robert to verify some details about his early relationship with Margaret. As they talked, Robert's voice took on a wistful tone. "You know, Olivia," he said softly, "writing this book, it's a brave thing you're doing. I'm not sure I would have had the courage to face our family's history so openly." Olivia felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "It hasn't been easy," she admitted, "but I feel like it's something I need to do. Not just for myself, but for anyone who's ever felt caught between the family they were born into and the family they choose." Robert was quiet for a moment before responding. "I'm proud of you, Olivia. I know I don't have the right to say that, given everything, but I am, and I'm grateful that you're giving me the chance to be a part of your life now." These moments of connection, of shared vulnerability, became the heart of Olivia's book. She wove together the perspectives of all involved: Margaret's guilt and love, Robert's regret and longing, Sophia's pain and forgiveness, and her own journey of discovery and acceptance. But always, at the center of the narrative, was John Chun, the man who had chosen to be her father, whose love had shaped her life in countless ways. As summer turned to fall, Olivia completed her first draft. She hesitated before sharing it, knowing that seeing their story in print might be difficult for her family. But she also knew that honesty was the only way forward. She arranged a family dinner, inviting Margaret, Robert, and Sophia. As they sat around the table, the atmosphere tense with anticipation, Olivia took a deep breath. "I finished the first draft of my book," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'd like you all to read it before I consider trying to publish. If any of you are uncomfortable with anything I've written, we'll discuss it. This is our story, all of us, and I want to make sure I've told it fairly." Margaret reached out, squeezing Olivia's hand. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure it wasn't easy to write. We'll read it, of course." Robert nodded, his expression a mixture of apprehension and pride. "Thank you for including us in this process, Olivia. It means a lot." Sophia, ever the peacemaker, smiled gently. "Your perspective is important, Olivia. We're honored that you want to share it with us." As Olivia distributed copies of the manuscript, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Whatever came next, they would face it as a family, complicated and imperfect, but bound together by love and shared history. The next few weeks were tense as Olivia waited for her family's responses. She threw herself into her teaching, grateful for the distraction. When the calls and emails finally came, they were a mix of emotions: tears, laughter, painful recollections, and moments of profound connection. Margaret called first, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh, Olivia, reading this, it was like reliving it all. The guilt, the fear, the love, you captured it all so beautifully. There were moments I hardly recognized myself, and others where I felt like you had reached into my heart and put my deepest feelings on the page." Robert's email came next, long and thoughtful. He praised Olivia's honesty and insight, while gently suggesting a few clarifications about his early relationship with Margaret. His final paragraph brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "Reading about John, seeing him through your eyes and understanding the depth of his love for you, it's humbling. He was a far better man than I ever gave him credit for. I'm grateful that you had him as a father, Olivia, and I'm honored that you're allowing me to be a part of your life now, in whatever capacity you're comfortable with." Sophia's response came in person. She showed up at Olivia's apartment one evening, manuscript in hand, eyes red from crying. Without a word, she pulled Olivia into a tight hug. "Thank you," Sophia whispered, "for understanding, for forgiving, for seeing the love behind the pain." As they sat together, talking late into the night, Olivia felt a deep sense of connection to her aunt. Sophia shared stories she'd never told before, of her own struggles with infertility, of the moment she decided to stay with Robert, of the joy and pain of watching Olivia grow up from a distance. "Your book," Sophia said as she was leaving, "it's going to help people, Olivia. It's going to show them that family, real family, is about so much more than blood." Encouraged by her family's responses, Olivia began the process of seeking publication. She was unprepared for the wave of interest her manuscript generated. Publishers were drawn to the raw honesty of her story, the complex interplay of love, betrayal, and forgiveness. As the publication date approached, Olivia found herself facing a new challenge: public scrutiny. Interviews, book signings, and speaking engagements filled her calendar. She was asked to talk about her experience on radio shows and podcasts, each time reopening the emotional wounds that had only recently begun to heal. But with each retelling, Olivia found that the story lost some of its power to hurt her. Instead, she began to see it as a testament to the strength of family bonds, to the capacity for forgiveness and growth. She received letters and emails from readers who saw their own struggles reflected in her words, who found hope and healing in her family's journey. One particularly memorable moment came during a book signing event. A young woman approached Olivia's table, clutching a copy of the book to her chest. Her eyes were brimming with tears as she spoke. "I found out last year that the man who raised me isn't my biological father," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been so angry, so confused, but reading your book, it helped me see that DNA doesn't define family. The man who chose to be my dad, who loved me and raised me, he's my real father. Your story gave me the courage to tell him that, to repair our relationship. Thank you." As Olivia signed the book, adding a personal note of encouragement, she felt a profound sense of purpose. Her family's painful secret, the truth that had once threatened to tear them apart, was now serving as a beacon of hope for others. The success of the book brought unexpected challenges as well. Old family friends and distant relatives, some of whom had been unaware of the true story, reached out with a mix of support and judgment. Olivia found herself having to navigate complex emotions, not just within her immediate family, but within her extended social circle as well. Through it all, Olivia was grateful for the unwavering support of her core family. Margaret, Robert, and Sophia stood by her, attending events when asked, respectfully declining interviews to keep the focus on Olivia's perspective, and providing a safe haven when the public scrutiny became overwhelming. As the whirlwind of book promotions began to settle, Olivia found herself at a crossroads. The success of her memoir had opened up new opportunities, speaking engagements, workshops on family dynamics and healing, even the possibility of a follow-up book. At the same time, she felt a pullback to her teaching career, to the quiet satisfaction of shaping young minds. One evening, as she sat in her apartment considering her options, Olivia's gaze fell on the framed photo of John Chun that held a place of honor on her desk. She thought about the scholarship fund established in his name, about the students whose lives were being changed because of his legacy. In that moment, Olivia had an epiphany. She realized that her journey, from the shock of discovery to the painful process of understanding and forgiveness, to the healing act of sharing her story, was itself a form of education. By speaking openly about family secrets, complex relationships, and the many forms love can take, she was continuing her father's legacy in her own unique way. With renewed purpose, Olivia began to sketch out plans for a new project. She envisioned a series of workshops and seminars, combining her skills as an educator with the insights she'd gained from her family's journey. The goal would be to help others navigate complex family dynamics, to foster understanding and healing in the face of difficult truths. As she worked late into the night, outlining her ideas and jotting down potential topics, Olivia felt a sense of excitement she hadn't experienced in months. This new direction felt right, a perfect blend of honoring her past and forging her own path forward. As Olivia delved deeper into planning her new project, she realized that she wanted to involve her family in a meaningful way. Each of them had a unique perspective on their shared experience, insights that could be valuable to others facing similar challenges. She decided to approach them individually, giving each the space to consider their potential involvement without pressure. Her first conversation was with her mother, Margaret. Over coffee in Margaret's sunlit kitchen, Olivia laid out her ideas. "Mom, I'm thinking of developing a series of workshops about family dynamics, secrets, and healing. I'd love for you to be a part of it, if you're comfortable. Your perspective as a mother, as someone who carried a secret for so long, I think it could be really powerful." Margaret was quiet for a long moment, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. It's a beautiful idea, Olivia, but I'm not sure. The thought of speaking publicly about all of this, it's intimidating. Olivia reached out, covering her mother's hand with her own. I understand, Mom. There's no pressure. Maybe we could start small? You could help me develop the curriculum, share your insights privately, and if you ever feel ready to speak publicly, the option will be there. Margaret's eyes welled with tears. Oh, Olivia, you've grown into such a compassionate, thoughtful woman. John would be so proud of you. Yes, I'd like to help in whatever way I can. The conversation with Robert was more challenging. Olivia met him at a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes and potential eavesdroppers. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this, Olivia, Robert said, his brow furrowed with concern. My role in all of this is not exactly admirable. Olivia leaned forward, her gaze intent. That's exactly why your perspective is valuable, Uncle Robert. You've lived with the consequences of your choices. You've seen the ripple effects of secrets and lies, but you've also experienced forgiveness and the chance to build new relationships. That journey, it could offer hope to others who've made mistakes, who are struggling to find a way forward. Robert's eyes glistened with unshed tears. When you put it that way, perhaps there is something worthwhile I could contribute. I'll think about it, Olivia. I promise. Sophia's response was the most enthusiastic. When Olivia shared her plans over lunch, Sophia's face lit up with excitement. Olivia, this is wonderful. There's such a need for this kind of open, honest discussion about family dynamics. Count me in, whatever you need. As they discussed potential topics and formats, Sophia's experience as a social worker brought valuable insights. We should include a session on forgiveness, she suggested. Not the Hollywood version, but the messy, ongoing process it really is. And perhaps something on redefining family bonds after a major revelation. With her family cautiously on board, Olivia threw herself into developing the workshop series. She drew on her teaching experience to create engaging, interactive sessions. She consulted with therapists and family counselors to ensure her material was grounded in sound psychological principles. As word of her project spread, Olivia began receiving invitations to speak at conferences and universities. Her unique blend of personal experience and professional expertise struck a chord with many in the fields of psychology, social work, and family studies. One particularly memorable invitation came from her alma mater. The psychology department asked her to give a guest lecture on the long-term effects of family secrets. As Olivia stood at the podium, looking out at a sea of eager young faces, she felt a surge of emotion. Family secrets, she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach, are often kept with the best of intentions. To protect, to avoid pain, to maintain a certain image of family harmony. But secrets have a weight of their own. They shape our relationships, our self-image, our understanding of the world in ways we might not even realize. As she shared her story, weaving in the psychological principles she'd studied, Olivia saw heads nodding, saw students furiously taking notes. She realized that her experience, painful as it had been, was providing valuable insights for the next generation of psychologists and counselors. After the lecture, a young man approached her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Ms. Chun," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "your story, it's given me the courage to face some truths in my own family. Thank you." Moments like these reinforced Olivia's conviction that she was on the right path. Her family's painful journey was being transformed into a force for healing and understanding. As the workshops and speaking engagements gained momentum, Olivia found herself traveling more frequently. During one such trip, she received an unexpected call from Robert. "Olivia," he said, his voice tinged with excitement, "I've been thinking about your project. I want to contribute, but in a way that feels authentic to me. I started writing my perspective on everything that happened. It's not pretty, it's not flattering, but it's honest. Would that be useful for your workshops?" Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. "Uncle Robert, that would be incredibly valuable. Thank you." Robert's contribution, raw and unflinching, became a powerful component of the workshops. His willingness to confront his past mistakes, to take responsibility for the pain he'd caused, offered a model of accountability and growth that many participants found inspiring. As the months passed, Olivia's project evolved and expanded. What had started as a series of workshops grew into a comprehensive program, offering support and guidance for families grappling with secrets, unexpected truths, and the process of rebuilding trust. Margaret, overcoming her initial hesitation, began participating in some of the workshops. Her gentle presence and hard-won wisdom provided comfort to many participants, especially those struggling with guilt and the fear of judgment. Sophia's professional expertise became an integral part of the program. She developed a series of exercises focused on forgiveness and rebuilding family bonds, drawing on both her personal experience and her years of work in social services. One evening, after a particularly intense workshop session, Olivia found herself sitting with her mother, uncle, and aunt, reflecting on how far they'd come. "You know," Margaret said softly, "when I think about where we were a year ago and where we are now, it's almost unbelievable. The secret that I thought would destroy our family has become the foundation for something beautiful." Robert nodded, his eyes distant. "I spent so many years living with guilt and regret. Being able to use that experience to help others. It doesn't erase the past, but it gives it meaning." Sophia reached out, squeezing Olivia's hand. "You've done something remarkable, Olivia. You've taken our family's pain and transformed it into a force for healing. John would be so proud of you." As Olivia looked at the three of them, her mother, her biological father, her aunt who had chosen to love her despite everything, she felt a wave of love and gratitude wash over her. Their journey had been far from easy, but it had brought them to this moment, united in purpose and bound by a deeper understanding of what family truly means. The mention of John brought a familiar ache to Olivia's heart, but it was tempered now by a sense of peace. She thought of the scholarship fund established in his name, of the students whose lives were being changed because of his legacy. And now, with this new project, she felt as though she were continuing his work in her own way, opening doors, offering hope, changing lives. As the conversation flowed around her, Olivia found herself thinking about the future. The workshops were just the beginning. There were books to be written, programs to be developed, a whole field of family dynamics and healing to be explored. For the first time in a long while, Olivia felt truly excited about what lay ahead. She had found her calling, a way to honor her past while creating something meaningful for the future. And she would do it with her family by her side. This complex, imperfect, loving family that had weathered the storm of secrets and emerged stronger for it. As the evening wore on, Olivia excused herself for a moment, stepping out onto the balcony for some fresh air. The city stretched out before her, a tapestry of lights and shadows. She thought about all the families out there, each with their own stories, their own secrets, their own struggles. "We're going to help them, Dad," she whispered to the night sky. "Your legacy of love and education. It's going to reach so many people." And as a warm breeze brushed her cheek, Olivia could almost imagine she felt her father's presence, his quiet pride and unwavering support. With a smile, she turned back to rejoin her family, ready to face whatever challenges and opportunities the future might bring. As Olivia's work continued to gain recognition, she found herself facing new challenges and opportunities. The success of her workshops and speaking engagements had caught the attention of a major publishing house, which approached her with an offer to write a comprehensive guide on navigating family secrets and rebuilding relationships. Excited by the prospect, but aware of the magnitude of the task, Olivia decided to take a sabbatical from her teaching position to focus on the book. She set up a small office in her apartment, the walls soon covered with notes, outlines, and family photos that served as both inspiration and reminder of how far they'd come. As she delved into the writing process, Olivia realized that this book would be different from her memoir. While her personal story would serve as a framework, she wanted to incorporate a wider range of experiences and expert insights. She began reaching out to therapists, counselors, and other families who had grappled with similar issues. One particularly memorable interview was with a family therapist who specialized in adoption and non-traditional family structures. Dr. Elaine Foster had decades of experience helping families navigate complex emotional terrain. The key, Dr. Foster explained during their conversation, is to understand that family is not just about blood. It's about choice, commitment, and love. When secrets come to light, it's an opportunity to redefine and strengthen those bonds, not necessarily to break them. Olivia nodded, scribbling notes furiously. That resonates so much with my experience. It wasn't easy, but ultimately, the truth allowed us to build more authentic relationships. Dr. Foster smiled warmly. Exactly. And that's what makes your story so powerful, Olivia. You're not just talking about overcoming a family secret. You're demonstrating how families can evolve and grow stronger through honesty and open communication. As the book took shape, Olivia found herself exploring themes she hadn't fully considered before. She dedicated a chapter to the concept of chosen family, drawing on her experiences with both John and Robert. Another section delved into the psychology of secret keeping, examining the motivations and long-term effects of maintaining family secrets. Throughout the writing process, Olivia continued to involve her family. She would often call Margaret to clarify details of the past or to get her perspective on how certain events had affected their family dynamics. These conversations, while sometimes emotionally draining, brought mother and daughter closer than ever before. Robert, true to his word, contributed his own written reflections. His unflinching honesty about his mistakes and the pain he had caused provided a powerful counterpoint to Olivia's narrative. One passage, in particular, struck Olivia deeply. I spent years justifying my actions, telling myself that love could excuse any betrayal. But love, real love, doesn't destroy families or force others to live a lie. It took losing everything to understand that. If there's one thing I hope readers take from my story, it's this. The truth may be painful, but it's the only foundation on which you can build genuine relationships. Sophia's input was invaluable, especially when it came to discussing forgiveness and rebuilding trust. She helped Olivia develop a series of exercises and reflection questions for readers, drawing on techniques she had used both personally and professionally. As the manuscript neared completion, Olivia realized that the process of writing this book had been therapeutic not just for her, but for her entire family. It had provided a structured way for them to process their experiences, to articulate feelings that had long gone unspoken, and to solidify the new, more authentic relationships they had built. The day Olivia submitted the final draft to her editor was bittersweet. She felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a strange emptiness. For months, the book had been her primary focus, a tangible representation of her family's journey. Now that it was complete, she found herself wondering, what next? It was during this period of uncertainty that Olivia received an unexpected invitation. A prestigious university was hosting a conference on family dynamics and generational trauma, and they wanted her to be a keynote speaker. The topic they proposed both excited and terrified her: breaking the cycle, how confronting family secrets can heal generational wounds. As Olivia prepared for the conference, she found herself reflecting on the concept of generational trauma. She thought about the choices her mother and Robert had made, the secrets they had kept, and how those decisions had shaped not just their lives, but hers as well. She thought about John and how his choice to love her unconditionally had provided a counterbalance to the weight of those secrets. The day of the conference arrived, and as Olivia took the stage, she felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. Looking out at the sea of faces, academics, therapists, students, and families, she took a deep breath and began. Family secrets are not just individual burdens. They are weights we pass down through generations, shaping the way we love, the way we trust, the way we see ourselves in the world. But today, I want to talk about how confronting those secrets, painful as it may be, can break that cycle. How truth, even when it's difficult, can set not just individuals, but entire family lines free. As she spoke, weaving together her personal story with the research and insights she had gathered, Olivia saw heads nodding, saw tears in some eyes, saw people turning to their neighbors to whisper or squeeze a hand. She realized that her family's story, unique as it was, touched on universal themes of love, betrayal, forgiveness, and the deep human need for authenticity in our closest relationships. After her speech, during the Q&A session, a young woman stood up, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke. "Ms. Chun, your story, it's given me courage. I've been keeping a secret from my family, afraid of how they'll react. But listening to you, I realized that the secret itself is causing more damage than the truth ever could. Thank you for showing me that there's hope on the other side of honesty." Moments like these reinforced Olivia's conviction that she had found her true calling. Her family's painful journey was being transformed into a beacon of hope for others, a roadmap for those navigating their own complex family dynamics. As the conference came to a close, Olivia found herself surrounded by people wanting to share their own stories, ask for advice, or simply express gratitude. It was overwhelming but also deeply fulfilling. She realized that in helping others confront their family secrets, she was continuing to heal her own wounds. That evening, as Olivia sat in her hotel room, emotionally drained but deeply satisfied, she received a text from Margaret. "Just wanted you to know how proud I am of you, sweetheart. Your courage in sharing our story is changing lives." John would be beaming with pride. Olivia felt tears well up in her eyes as she read the message. She thought about how far they had come as a family, from the shock and pain of the initial revelation to this moment of shared purpose and pride. As she prepared for bed, Olivia's gaze fell on the family photo she always carried with her, a snapshot from a summer picnic years ago. Before the truth had come out, John's arm was around her shoulders. Margaret was laughing at something off camera, and Robert and Sophia stood nearby, their smiles slightly strained but genuine. Looking at the photo now, Olivia saw not just the secrets and pain hidden behind those smiles, but also the love that had ultimately allowed them to overcome those challenges. She realized that this messy, complicated, resilient love was the true heart of her message. With renewed energy, Olivia opened her laptop and began jotting down ideas for her next project. She envisioned a series of workshops that would bring families together to confront their own secrets and begin the healing process. It would be challenging, emotionally intense work, but she knew firsthand the freedom and connection that could come from it. As she worked late into the night, Olivia felt a sense of purpose and clarity she had never experienced before. She was no longer just the product of a family secret. She was a guide, a healer, a bridge between the pain of the past and the possibility of a more authentic future. And as she finally drifted off to sleep, Olivia felt at peace with all aspects of her identity: John's daughter, Robert's biological child, Margaret's daughter, Sophia's niece, and now, in her own right, a beacon of hope for families struggling with their own hidden truths. The journey ahead would not be easy, but Olivia was ready to face it, armed with the love of her complex family and the knowledge that even the most painful truths could lead to healing and growth. As Olivia's work continued to gain momentum, she found herself at the forefront of a growing movement towards greater honesty and authenticity in family relationships. Her book became a bestseller, touching lives far beyond what she had ever imagined. The workshops she developed were being implemented in family therapy centers across the country, and requests for speaking engagements poured in from around the world. But with this success came new challenges. Olivia found herself struggling to balance her public role as an advocate and expert with her private life and the ongoing journey of her own family. The constant retelling of their story, while powerful for others, sometimes reopened old wounds. It was during this whirlwind of activity that Olivia received news that would once again reshape her understanding of family and identity. Margaret called one evening, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Olivia, sweetheart, I've received a letter from a woman claiming to be your half-sister." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Olivia processed her mother's words. Half-sister? How? Who? Margaret took a deep breath before continuing. "It seems that Robert, before his relationship with me, he had a brief affair with another woman. She got pregnant but never told him. The daughter, Her name is Claire. She's been searching for her biological father and she found us." As the implications of this news sank in, Olivia felt a complex swirl of emotions. Shock at the existence of a sibling she had never known about. Anger at Robert for yet another secret coming to light. And, surprisingly, a flutter of excitement at the prospect of a new family connection. Over the next few weeks, Olivia found herself navigating uncharted emotional territory. She reached out to Claire cautiously, and they began a correspondence that was both thrilling and terrifying. They shared photos, stories of their childhoods, and the strange experience of discovering a sibling in adulthood. As Olivia got to know Claire through their exchanges, she was struck by the similarities between them, not just in appearance, but in temperament and interests. Claire was a high school English teacher with a passion for literature that mirrored Olivia's own love of learning and education. The decision to meet in person was not taken lightly. Olivia consulted with her family, with Claire, and even with some of the family therapists she had worked with on her book. Finally, a date was set for Claire to visit. The day of the meeting arrived, filled with nervous energy. Olivia had decided to host a small family gathering at her apartment, neutral ground that wouldn't be overwhelming for Claire. As the doorbell rang, Olivia took a deep breath, reminding herself of all she had learned about openness, honesty, and the power of embracing complex family dynamics. Opening the door, Olivia found herself face to face with a woman who could have been her twin. Claire's eyes, so like her own, were wide with emotion. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the weight of their shared history and newfound connection hanging between them. Then, without a word, they fell into an embrace. Tears flowed freely as years of unknown longing and newfound kinship poured out. When they finally pulled apart, both women were laughing through their tears. "It's so strange," Claire said, wiping her eyes. "I feel like I've known you my whole life, and yet we've just met." Olivia nodded, understanding completely. "Welcome to the family, Claire. It's complicated, but it's full of love." As they joined the others, Margaret, Robert, and Sophia, in the living room, Olivia was struck by the tableau before her. Here was her family, in all its messy, beautiful complexity. Margaret, looking nervous but determined to welcome this new addition. Robert, his face a mask of guilt and hope as he faced the daughter he had never known. Sophia, steady as always, ready to embrace Claire as she had embraced Olivia years ago. The conversation that followed was by turns awkward, emotional, and surprisingly warm. Claire shared her story of growing up wondering about her biological father, of the search that had led her to them, of her fears and hopes in reaching out. Robert, for his part, was openly remorseful about his past actions while expressing gratitude for the chance to know Claire now. As the evening wore on, Olivia found herself in the familiar role of mediator and guide, helping to navigate the complex emotions and dynamics at play. But this time, it was personal in a way her professional work had never been. This was her family, expanding and evolving right before her eyes. Later that night, after Claire had left with promises of future meetings and ongoing communication, Olivia sat with her mother, Robert, and Sophia, processing the events of the evening. "I can't believe there was yet another secret," Olivia said, a note of weariness in her voice. "Just when I thought we had everything out in the open." Robert looked down, shame evident in his posture. "I'm so sorry, Olivia. I truly didn't know about Claire, but I understand that doesn't excuse my past actions." Sophia reached out, placing a hand on Robert's arm. "What matters now is how we move forward. Claire is family, and we have the opportunity to welcome her with open arms and open hearts." Margaret nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Olivia, watching you with Claire tonight, I saw so much of John in you. The way you immediately sought to make her feel welcome, to bridge the gaps between us all. He would be so proud of the woman you've become." Olivia felt a lump form in her throat at the mention of John. Even now, years after his passing, his influence on her life remained profound. She wondered, not for the first time, what he would make of all that had transpired, the revelations, the healing, and now this new addition to their family. As if reading her thoughts, Margaret continued softly, John always said that family was about love, not just blood. I think he would have welcomed Claire with open arms, just as he welcomed you." The words hung in the air, a testament to the man who had shaped Olivia's understanding of what it meant to be a parent, to be family. In that moment, Olivia felt a renewed sense of purpose. The work she had been doing, helping families navigate secrets and build more authentic relationships. It wasn't just a career, it was a calling, a way to honor John's legacy of love and acceptance. Over the next few months, Olivia found herself revising and expanding her workshops and writing to include the experience of discovering unknown siblings and integrating new family members. Claire, with her unique perspective, became a valuable contributor to this work. Together, the sisters developed a series of seminars specifically for adults discovering biological relatives later in life. They addressed the complex emotions involved, the excitement of new connections, the grief for lost time, the potential for disappointment or rejection. Their own relationship, still new but growing stronger every day, served as a powerful example of the possibility for connection and understanding. As Olivia's family continued to evolve and grow, she found that her understanding of identity and belonging deepened as well. She was John Chun's daughter, shaped by his love and guidance. She was Robert's biological child, connected by DNA and a growing relationship built on honesty and forgiveness. She was Margaret's daughter, bound by years of shared history and newfound openness. She was Sophia's niece, inspired by her strength and capacity for forgiveness. And now, she was Claire's sister, exploring a new facet of family and connection. Each of these relationships, complex and sometimes challenging as they were, contributed to the tapestry of who Olivia was. And it was this understanding that identity is not fixed but fluid, that family can be both born and chosen, that became the cornerstone of her work. One evening, as Olivia put the finishing touches on the curriculum for a new workshop series, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the shock of discovering the diary in the attic to the recent addition of Claire to their family, every step had been a lesson in resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love. She thought about John, the father who had chosen her, whose love had been the bedrock of her life. She thought about Robert, the biological father she was still getting to know, whose mistakes and subsequent growth had taught her so much about redemption. She thought about Margaret, whose courage in finally revealing the truth had set them all on this path of healing. And she thought about Sophia, whose capacity for forgiveness had shown Olivia the true meaning of unconditional love. As she saved her work and prepared for bed, Olivia's gaze fell on the family photo that still held pride of place on her desk. But now, next to it stood a new photo, one taken at a recent family gathering, with Claire included. The image captured them all, Margaret and Robert, their faces lined with age but eyes bright with happiness. Sophia, her arm around Claire's shoulders in a welcoming gesture, and Olivia herself at the center, connecting them all. Looking at the two photos side by side, the past and the present, the family she had always known and the family they had become, Olivia felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been difficult, painful at times, but it had led them here, to a place of honesty, acceptance, and deep, abiding love. As she drifted off to sleep, Olivia's last thoughts were of gratitude. Gratitude for the truth that had set them free, for the love that had sustained them through the darkest times, and for the family, complex, imperfect, and beautiful, that she was privileged to call her own. In the years to come, Olivia would continue to share her family story, to guide others through their own journeys of discovery and reconciliation. And with each retelling, with each life touched, she would honor the legacy of love and acceptance that John Chun had instilled in her, a legacy that had the power to heal wounds, bridge divides, and create family bonds stronger than blood or secrets could ever be. If you enjoyed this story, we'd love for you to support us by leaving a like and subscribing to our Slices of Life channel. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Which city are you talking about? It's very rewarding for us to provide our followers with an enjoyable moment. We appreciate the unconditional support you show us in every story. Blessings!